Before going to the renewable energy, I wanted to touch on a few things which more or less is probably redundant in this hall because we are talking about environment and sustainability. However, it still is an issue of debate even though it's not about science. First of all, I think we all agree that climate change is real. And it's a no-brainer, but still there are few people like some of the most powerful elite in the world, they don't agree that climate change is happening. And you know, the point is, why I showed this picture here is, if you look into this is a repeat photography taken by, I got it from the internet, but this is one of the famous glacial lake Imja, which is in the Everest region. It shows that our Himalayas have been melting in a rapid rate over the last few decades. And if you correlate with the greenhouse gas emissions, then it shows that the rise in temperature has a direct positive hockey stick correlation. That is like until the industrialization, the carbon emission or greenhouse gas emissions from the man-made activities like industries, vehicles were very low. Then it shoot with the industrialization. People started to discover steam engine and how we could generate energy from coal. And simultaneously, same time, scientists dug the ice core from Canada and found out there was, they did the analysis of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere over last few centuries and found that the carbon dioxide concentration was stable until the industrialization era. After that, it also started to rise, along with the rise in greenhouse gas, and the temperature also has risen subsequently. So the point why I am showing this picture is, we don't have that big share of carbon footprint. I think we are to blame for the climate change, but we are on the frontier of the receiving end. We will be suffering a lot. So this is one pretext I wanted to touch. Second one is something which is much closer to home, air pollution. In May 2017, just a few months back, one study was carried out in Kathmandu Valley, and they found the total suspended particulate matter of Chava Hill around 5,000 cubic meter, micron per meter cube, which is more than 20 times of national standard, and our national standard is very flexible compared to WHO guidelines. So that shows how worse our environment is, and in that there were three sources which were identified to be very crucial. One was construction, which is around 64%, and it might get down later once the construction is completed. The second one was transportation. It contributes almost 34% of the TSPs. And then the third one was brick factory, which is still, we can see there is a movement going on to push brick factory away from the Kathmandu Valley, but the problem is it's just in the outskirts and the pollution is coming inside. So still the impact is there, around 4 to 5%. So the second thing I wanted to touch on was air pollution. It's also worsening. And it's not only Kathmandu. It's also, there are, if you go into the Department of Environment website, the government website, there are real-time monitoring of all the stations they have installed in Nepal. They don't have that many stations. Most of them are in Kathmandu, but one is in Lumbini. And the air quality of Lumbini is also very bad. We think Kathmandu is the worst part of the country in terms of air pollution, but equally it's also worse in Lumbini. It became a feature in the BBC because the team, they came to Nepal and did a documentary, and they found that monks were using masks for their praying. So Lumbini is also equally polluted. So air pollution has become a national phenomenon now. The third thing is, no matter how our quality of life is in Kathmandu, in reality, the Nepal still rely a lot in firewood. A typical day for a household in village will be like this. They'll spend a lot of their time inside kitchen for cooking. And if they're not cooking, then they are outside in the forest collecting firewood. More than 78% of our energy consumption come from biomass. And now talk about the share of the renewables in our energy mix. There is 3% of hydroelectricity and another 3% of modern renewables that we call off-grid, like micro-hydro, solar, wind, which is being undertaken by Alternative Energy Promotion Center of Nepal government. And then there is another 16% from petroleum products, which are very high carbon intensive. And even now in this 3%, we are importing around 40% of electricity from India, and which source we don't know, but many think is from coal. So this is the fact. Most of the time we tend to forget that how important and how significant is the role of firewood in our lifestyle, because I don't think there are that many houses in Kathmandu that use firewood for cooking, whereas still it takes around 78% of our energy consumption. So these three pretexts I wanted to lay a foundation before jumping into why we need renewables. Now accumulation of all this shows that our business as usual model is very flawed. We are very vulnerable to climate change. I think in 2010, ECMOD produced the glacial lake outburst flood inventory, which was kind of a revisit of the one they did in 2001. That shows there's more than 20 potentially dangerous glacial lake that could burst anytime, which can create a havoc in downstream. And with lots of losses on infrastructure, bridges, a lot of hydro projects on downstream, those are all at risk. And most of our 2/3 of our workforce in Nepal rely on agrarian economy, but it contributes to less than 35% of our GDP. So we are very inefficient, but it's called subsistence farming. So that is our part of our life, agriculture. And most of the farmers, they rely on rainwater. They don't have proper irrigation canals, and rainwater is monsoon, which has become more erratic and unpredictable because of climate change. So climate change is taking a toll on our life, and gradually, if we don't take any action, then we might be doomed. So this is not kind of something like people in the West will say, like there are people who are creating this panic, but this is actually fact for Nepal. And there are also brighter side, like because of increase in temperature in the mountains, so the tree line has shifted up. That means you can grow some of the tropical and subtropical vegetables even in the mountain now, like tomatoes, which were impossible. People used to import everything from the valley or from the downhill, now are found being grown near their farm or near their house. And we don't have done any climate proofing of our hydro projects. It's based on a business as usual model. And also the problem is, we have this government policy where we have to hand over our hydro project to the government for the private developer after 30 years. So usually they don't tend to make civil infrastructure that will last beyond 30 years. But with climate change, with the potential risks of bluff, that is even still vulnerable. And the second thing is about the air pollution. There was one report by World Bank that says the premature death from air pollution, both outdoor and indoor, in Nepal in 2013 was recorded to be 22,000. And then there was another independent report from German Institute that shows that in 2016 the death was around 36,000. That means we are losing almost 4.7% of our GDP on health issues, which is around $2.8 billion annually. So we are losing that money due to air pollution. And the source of that air pollution is primarily 3 or 4 things. One is indoor biomass, cooking. 2 is transportation. We're using a lot of petroleum fuels. 3 is our factories. Look at Kathmandu. All the 3 districts in Kathmandu, they're inside the valley, and they all have their own industrial zone inside the valley. And because of our very bad topography, all the pollutions in Kathmandu get trapped in the inside, and only time they get out is actually in the daytime during 2 to 4 p.m. That's the 2 hours window they get to clean the air. So the morning walk in Kathmandu is as toxic as smoking. And another thing I wanted to touch was, we are a very import heavy economy. We import 10 times more than we actually export. And back in the day, we're importing, food and all the things, but now we're also importing electricity. As I said earlier, the government has tried to reduce 16% of what they were importing, but nonetheless, I think we're still importing around 40% of electricity. That means we are more vulnerable now to India. And of the 20% of the import, it is, for petroleum's product, and most of the petroleum product we use for vehicles. So I'm just touching on this pretext because I want to now take you to what could be a better future. We talk about sustainable development. I don't think I need to go through the definition of sustainable development in this room, because probably earlier discussion was also on sustainability, and probably you should all be knowing what it will mean. And Nepal has signed this SDG goal, Sustainable Development Goals, which is a UN-led mission. Back in the day, it was called Millennium Development Goal. Now it's called SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. And Nepal, it started from 2016 and it will complete in 2030. There are a lot of goals and targets, and in general, they are all divided into these 17 bigger objectives. And if you look here, we talk about number 7 is about access to clean energy, and then there is number 15 is about biodiversity, saving the biodiversity. There is gender equity, quality education. These are all linked one way or another to our energy habit. As I was showing in my earlier picture slides, in firewood, when we say firewood, it has a link with gender inequality. Because in most of the rural household, there is a clear division of labor. The male are supposed to be a breadwinner. They have to go abroad or work in the farm or do business. Meanwhile, women are supposed to look after the household chores. They are supposed to do the cooking, cleaning, and they are also the one to fetch the firewood along with the children. That means they are spending a lot of their quality time on collecting firewoods or to make their end meet or using unsustainable energy source. So now the solution is, to me at least, it is renewable energy. And in Nepal, when we say about renewable energy, arguably hydro is renewable. There's no doubt about that. But it's not only hydro. There is more than that. There is solar, there is wind, even biomass, as long as the amount you consume and the number of vegetation you grow. If vegetation is growing is bigger, then sustainable harvesting is done, then it's also renewables. So renewable is a key for a better future because it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, or it doesn't actually emit greenhouse gas emissions, which is the primary reason for the climate change. And we are one of the victims in the forefront. 2, as I said earlier, it's not only about hydro. So, and our hydro will be at risk because of climate change, with uncertainty in the hydrological parameters. We don't know what if all the glacial lakes start to burst. And probably all our hydro projects might be flooded or inundated or damaged. So in such case, to diversify our electricity supply from using renewable sources like wind and solar, will also provide greater security and stability for our electricity source. And another one was about electric vehicles. If we use electric vehicles instead of diesel or petroleum vehicles, then we'll be reducing air pollution. And it will have more direct and visible positive impact on our life. Because climate change, as I told earlier, like maybe there are countries who may not believe it, but clean air, everybody believes. And even our constitution have provided that right for every citizen to have access to clean air. So, and having electric vehicles instead of petroleum vehicles might means we might have a better air. And it will also reduce women's drudgery, because once there is a report, I think, in terms of gender and energy. Any household that switches from biomass to electricity for cooking have a improved gender inequality or better quality of life for women and children. It's a proof, and there are a lot of data and documentation. I think even for us, it is more like it's a no-brainer that we can actually second guess that having access to cooking stove or say electric cooker instead of a fire stove might means like we will be saving more time, and that time could be used for other quality things like children can spend more time in studying, they can go to school, women can involve in more income generating activities. All those things will have a positive impact on the welfare of the family. And better indoor quality, of course, because if we substitute firewood cooking by electricity, that means there is no issues of indoor smoke, and that will means have a positive impact on the health and well-being of the people living in that house. And also, wind park have become a tourist spot in areas where they have not seen wind energy. And this is actually new, the boom is quite recent and new in terms of wind project proliferation throughout the world. When we installed one wind project in Nepal in the 1980s, we were one of the pioneers. Like when we did our first hydro in 1911, we were one of the pioneers. So in Philippines, there is one island where they have recently installed this wind project. It has been in operation since last 5 years. It has become one of the major tourist attractions now. So it will increase tourism, which will subsequently also increase revenue and also create jobs. And in the US, I think in 2016, there are more people working in solar energy sector than in coal and gas. So that obviously shows that there is also a prospect of new job opportunities with renewable energy. So that's why I think the business as usual is a bit flawed right now in Nepal, and the future will be bringing in renewable energy in the forefront. Now let's look into what do we have then. Hydro, everybody knows about hydro, 83,000 megawatt. We keep reading that when we're in the school. But unfortunately, right now, we have not even installed up to 1,000 megawatt. I think our total installed capacity is between 850 to 890. Having said that, hydro is still the cheapest source of electricity for Nepal, and it should be our major focus. And our government recently, in the last outgoing finance minister also declared that they will going to install 17,000 megawatt in 7 years. We have heard out of those promises, but still let's hope that hydro will be there. And now this is solar. In solar, the potential is boundless. We don't know how much is our potential, but if we were to use 2% of our land, then there's a potential of around 2,100 megawatt of solar energy. But as of now, there is around 40 megawatt of solar been installed off grid, which has not been connected to the grid. It is more for rural household. Well, there are few projects that have been connected to the grid, more like for a test and trial based on donations. And one of those is, big one is this one in KUKL, Kathmandu Upataka Khane Pani Limited in Chobar, just across the street of TU. It's around 690 kilowatt system, which was installed by JICA. So our total installed solar capacity could be around 700 to 800 kilowatt. And then our third major source of energy will be wind. As I was talking before, in the 1980s and early 90s, when we installed two 10 kilowatt wind tower in Mustang, they were at that time they were state of art technology. It was installed by a Danish company under the Danish government fund, and they were using British technology, which back then was the industry benchmark, 10 kilowatt. And something happened bad. So the turbine blew up or something, so it broke. And then NEA abandoned the entire wind portfolio from their sector. So there was a 3 decades of moratorium in the government to do anything on wind. So in 2010, Asian Development Bank then did one renewable energy village program where they used wind solar hybrid system in Nawalparasi. It was a 12.5 kilowatt system, and that again has started now, given an opportunity for our government to consider wind also as an option for our energy solution. And for talking about wind, in 2006, there was one mission executed by UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, in partnership with the Center for Energy Studies at TU. They did the modeling of Nepal in terms of what is the wind resource potential. And using the back then infrastructure, they decided that there is at least 3,000 megawatt of wind energy potential that will be harvested to generate electricity in Nepal. Now the things have moved. Probably back then there were areas where there were no road access, which might have road access now. That means the potential could increase. And also the technology have changed in last 10 years. And talking about technology, as I was saying that this is a very recent phenomenon, wind and solar. Wind, until 15 years ago, there were barely a megawatt of wind in India. In 15 years time, they have installed more than 30,000 megawatt. In China only, in last 15 years, they have installed more than 1,20,000 megawatt. So this has a greater advantage of installation. Hydro is cheap, as I was talking earlier, but the time it takes to build hydro is very long. And the cost of hydro has gone significantly high over the last few decades. Meanwhile, the cost of wind and solar has continued to decline. So it's a technology. Wind and solar is more like a technology, whereas for hydro, it's a product. It has stopped development in terms of innovation and R&D for last over 15 years. So everyone is now betting and investing in wind and solar because it's quick. And with solar, it's even better because all you need to know is whether it is sunny or not. If you have good sunshine hour every year, then you don't even need to do any data collection or measurement campaign to put wind solar project at your house. But if you want to do it more into industrial scale, like utility scale, megawatt site project, then you might have to take some diligence to collect the data before doing the construction or installation. And the last one, as I was saying, this something that we should never forget is biomass. 78%. We cannot come down to zero like in 5 years. It might take another 100 years to be completely out of not using biomass at all. So, and we may not live 100 years, none of us here. So that means biomass is also part of our energy mix. And as I was talking earlier, that as long as the harvesting is sustainable, as long as you produce more than you consume, it is a renewable source. And apparently 44% of our land mass is covered by forest. And there was, I think, one outcry in early 1990, like late 1980s and early 90s, that Nepal's forest will be completely nude or completely deforested within 20 years. But that report created given alarm to our government to come up with a new forestry management system. So they introduced community forestry management program, which after that has seen a rapid increase in our forest size. So we actually have more forest every year. So rate of deforestation is relatively low. Maybe in certain pockets it might be high, but in general it's very low. Now talking about just to touch more on biomass and what it means. So we were doing this one research in Mustang. In Mustang, people, they take to take hot shower. Usually they use firewood to boil water to take hot shower. So one person usually take 5 kilograms of firewood to have 1 bucket of water, which they mix with cold water and then take a bath. That means if you were to substitute 100 persons bath, so 100 persons per day per bath, then you will be saving annually 220 trees in Mustang alone. And Mustang, it takes a lot of time to grow a tree. I think maybe 10 times more than in Kathmandu. So the significance in certain pockets is biomass may not be a solution, viable solution. So you need to consider local context too. But the paradox now. So when we talk about renewable energy, for our mindset, both for the government and for non-government sector, it has been more like it's off-grid and small scale. This is a picture. It's a typical renewable energy when you talk. It's a solar home system, 20-watt system. And you have 3 or 4 light bulb, 1 outlet to charge your mobile phone. That's it. That is what we talk when you say renewable energy in Nepal. Whereas it could mean different for elsewhere. This is the EV. I think we don't need to talk about this car. Everybody probably knows what Tesla is. So renewable is like megawatts and megawatts of wind farm, and then there is an electric vehicle which take at least for there is. Have you heard of BYD? It's a Chinese version of. It's a very popular and like probably number 2 brand in terms of EV. They have BYD in Nepal. We don't have Tesla so far. And there is one place where you can charge your BYD away from your home, like concept of supercharging. So to have that charging station, we need 65 kVA, which is roughly 60 kilowatt of a power charging socket. That means if you want to use a solar park for that, you might need more than 100 kilowatt of solar panels. So it's too big of a scale to think in Nepal. If we were to use, say, roughly, if 5% of the population were using Tesla car in Kathmandu, there will be blackout every hour. We don't have enough electricity. But I think this is where we should be heading towards. This should be our future. Now, as I was talking about like earlier, why it matters. 35,000 people die every year because of pollution, air pollution, indoor and outdoor. It's even, almost 50-50. And transportation has a major toll on it. And also we are relying on one single source of electricity, and we are also importing electricity. So we are becoming more vulnerable now than before. So for those all reasons, I think renewable energy is quite important. Now, what are the challenges? Why we are stuck in this conundrum of off-grid and small scale? It's because of the policies. So there is, for on-grid, we have only one clear policy for hydro. If you want to build hydro, all you need to do is find area where there is nobody has obtained a license, and then you just follow a process. There's a clear, hard and fast rule there. You don't have to use too much of your brain. The entire ecosystem is already built. All you need to do is have that fund, money that you need, and the right team to get it done. But what if you want to do solar? What if you want to do wind or biomass? There is one entrepreneur who has applied for biomass on-grid project for last 9 years. The application is pending. There is, like, I think if you have read newspaper in the recent time, then there is around 181 megawatt of on-grid solar applications, but none of them had signed the power purchase agreement with NEA for our electricity utility. It's because the policies are not clear. And probably the second thing is the cost. Now, though the solar price has gone down significantly, similarly the wind price also has gone down significantly, still when it comes to tariff, cost of electricity per kilowatt hour, then hydro seems to be cheaper. But problem with hydro, as we were talking about, takes ages to build, and cost of having no electricity. Research done based on our economic parameters and benchmark in 2010 was around 45 rupees per unit, whereas the cost of electricity for wind and solar could be less than 10 rupees. But still, government thinks it's very expensive. Of course, compared to hydro, it is almost 90% expensive. So, and then we have an option for off-grid only. But the problem with off-grid is the villages are so remote, investors do not have confidence on their clientele. So they cannot risk to invest on building a project and selling electricity. So they rather want to do something more into EPC model. That is, like, you will sell the system. You will install it and take the money. You don't want to sell electricity, like what we do for on-grid. And then we have our subsidy policy through the Alternative Energy Promotion Center, which is under the Ministry of Environment and Population. And they have set certain size limits. So by definition, they want to limit us to small scale, 100 kilowatt. Now I'll give you one example. Again, talking about Mustang, because that's where we try to do our project, and it's the windiest part of Nepal. Right now, the demand of Mustang is around 650 kilowatt, but the supply is less than 200 kilowatt. So if you go to Jomsom, you better carry your power bank, and also probably if you have portable solar kit, then get it with you, because there are high chances that you will be in a blackout time. There is no electricity there. And now why is that? Because the problem is with our policies. Now an entrepreneur wants to go and develop a project in Jomsom because it's a tourist town and there are people who can afford to buy higher premium electricity, and which the hotelier can sell it as a premium service to their client. There is no heater in any good hotel in Jomsom. They don't have the electricity to run those heaters or AC. So now the point is, there is demand, but the policy is hindering it. So if we want to build a project there, then the government will say they already have access to electricity. It's not off-grid area technically, because there is any electricity there. But the problem is the demand is so high and supply is very low. Now we want to do the project, then policy will hinder us. And now if the government will push you to go to off-grid area, then the problem is the client are not very bankable, and the bank will also not take the risks to give you the loan. So these are the reasons why it's quite difficult to penetrate in off-grid sector. And another most important thing is the demand for electricity is very low in rural area, because they cannot afford to spend more on electricity. So I think the most expensive one, the people, if you do survey and talk to people, they say okay, maybe I can spend up to 500 rupees per month on electricity, but I cannot spend more than that. So, and now we're talking about 100 house, multiply that by 500 per month, and what is the number? Now, if you were to hire 2 engineers, that will take all the revenue. So, it's not profitable. So, that's one bottleneck. And the third is finance is another bottleneck. We have a simple, financing system where there is, you go to the bank and put collateral and take the money in the project. And bank have a lot of limitations, and bank will not invest unless they are confident. And that means if they are not confident, so like example with technology, which is not very known to them, or say if the collateral is too high, then it will associate back on the investor. And now for alternative investing instruments like crowdfunding, the law is unclear, because I think if you do business, you know that for donation you have to pay more tax than for sales. So how do you deal with this taxation and the repatriation, the problem of bringing in foreign direct investment? When you bring money in dollar, and they want their money back in dollar, but then our central government doesn't have enough dollar reserve, so they will be more reluctant on giving you that permission. So, and the final thing is, I think the biggest problem is this, at promoter's risk. So there is no concept of project financing for renewable projects. So if you go and talk to a reputed bank who is working with the government and using government fund, even then they will ask you for, like, say, you need to put either a collateral or somebody should provide a personal guarantee. So they don't want to finance on the project because the clientele of project is unreliable for them. So the access to finance is also one problem so far. But regardless, it's happening and it's taking its own pace. So, if renewable energy is already present, say in our neighboring states like China and India, it's going to be future for Nepal. So I just wanted to show you this graph that shows that by 2020, see, this is the cost of coal, which is ever increasing. Meanwhile, this is the solar, the orange one, and the blue one is wind. They are ever decreasing. So that shows that even without subsidy, solar and wind has become an affordable source of energy all over the world now. Only problem so far in Nepal is our benchmark is not coal, our benchmark is hydro. But unfortunately, hydro is also increasing. The cost, say 15 years ago, to build one hydro project, it will have cost you less than 1 megawatt will have cost less than 10 crore. And 6 years ago, it will have cost you 12 crores. Now people are talking about 18 crores per megawatt or more. Whereas solar, 15 years ago, it will have cost you 40 crore. And 10 years ago, we were talking about 20 crore. 5 years ago, it was around 12 crore. Now we're talking about 8 crore. So there's a rapid decline in the cost of solar. Similarly with wind, 10 years ago, we're talking about 20 crore per megawatt. Now we're talking about 15 crore per megawatt. And it's also likely to go down to around 10 crore per megawatt. In India, 2 months ago, there was one auction for solar project. And somebody bid for 2.44 INR per kilowatt hour, which is around 5 rupees per kilowatt hour, which is very competitive. So the price of solar is going down, and perhaps that means even without subsidy, this will stay. This will be sustainable and viable source of energy option for us too. I don't have that many slides, so I'm actually running out of my slides. I'm probably adding to my few last slides. So now, what are the opportunities for getting into renewable energy business then? As I showed you, Okay. You know, still there is a high degree of electricity penetration in Nepal. The only problem is low quality grid. As more than 65% of our population has access to grid electricity. But like in Mustang, everybody is facing this problem of power shortage. It's only in Kathmandu where there is, or few other cities where there is no load shedding right now. But if you go to Biratnagar, Birganj, Nepalganj, electricity crisis is everywhere. And let's even ignore the 65%. Even for for the remaining 30%, if we were to provide them off-grid electricity, there is still an opportunity for 900 megawatt, and that's quite a lot. And so this it is almost like the 100% of what we have right now. So there is a potential to contribute another 100% by off-grid renewable only. And for on-grid, currently our demand hovers around 1400 megawatt per day, and there is still load shedding, as I was telling earlier. So there is around 300 megawatt to 400 megawatt of load shedding, and then we are also importing around another 300 megawatt from India. So there is also opportunity to penetrate electricity on grid electricity too, and our demand is also growing. We have an annual, just on a business as usual, our electricity demand growth is around 10% per year. But people consider this more as it's a suppressed one. So if we had, say, Kathmandu is one of the most electricity efficient city in the world. We use very less electricity because we are used to with having power cuts, and there are very small transformer, and each house have a lot of these small circuit breakers. So we cannot, even if you have money, you cannot install a large electrical appliances in your house. So that if we were to have like unlimited access of electricity, then that will unfold. And then our more than 2/3 of workforce depend on agriculture. And agriculture so far is very rudimentary. We don't use high-end technologies. Like people who are still using have to walk miles to fetch waters, but those could be substituted by renewable energy technologies like solar water pumping. And now there are some electric motors to plow your field. So there are other opportunities for renewable energy to intervene as well. And also the access to finance is improving. It's not there yet, but the signals are very, very positive. Like there is a Green Climate Fund which has come after the Paris Agreement. And if that happens, then there will be, Nepal can access up to $200 million per year as a loan and grant. There's a lot of money to come. And even in Nepal, the Alternative Energy Center has set up this fund called Central Renewable Energy Fund, which is being handled by one of these A-class bank, and there are other A-class banks who will provide loan for renewable energy projects. So they are also being under development, and that also shows a good future. It's more about like how much we can cash in our opportunities. That onus is on us, and when we say us, it's also about on our government. So yeah, this is my last slide. I just wanted to say that business as usual is not good, and we do have a lot of potential for renewable energies, and hydro is not only one source of electricity, and it's also not only one renewable energy. There is solar, there is wind, there is biomass, and our current myopic mindset is that renewable energy is just off-grid and small scale. But if we want to drive Tesla, then it has to be on-grid and large scale. So on that positive note, I just want to conclude my presentation. And thank you very much.